why anti-India slogans are rising again in Bangladesh, how Osman Hadi's death is being related to India, and why in recent times relationship between India and Bangladesh has turned way beyond sour. Whenever Bangladesh goes through a political transition, one pattern has repeatedly emerged where the domestic protests take an angle of an external force working towards it, and mostly you will find India at the focal point. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to look into why the recent protests in Bangladesh again have anti-India slogans, why in the recent times Bangladesh is steering away and away from India, and what are the reasons behind it. We will also be looking into the consequences and the suffering that we have seen because of this rift as of now. So let us begin with understanding that what has triggered the present protests that we see in Bangladesh. So recently there was death of a youth leader, that is Sharif Osman Hadi, and he was one of the important figures in the pro-democracy 2024 uprising that we saw, that put out Sheikh Hasina, that put out Awami League out of the political picture in Bangladesh and put Muhammad Yunus as the interim leader of the country. Now, recently it was death of this very leader that has sparked the spontaneous mass protests across Dhaka, Rajshahi and Chittagong. Now, when we are talking about these domestic protests, they have been done in as many violent ways, but another peculiar and repetitive pattern that has been seen, that again there have been instances where Indian places, Indian diplomatic premises, they have been targeted. So that means again the domestic protest has taken an angle of involvement of an external force, and mostly that external force is pointing towards India in this particular scenario. So when we are talking about this protest that has recently shaped up, this is basically a key shift that we get to see, that how the protest narrative has rapidly gone from that this protest was about bringing justice to the death of this youth leader Osman Hadi, and now all of a sudden this narrative has switched to anti-India, that how India is facilitating the culprits who were responsible for the death of Osman Hadi, and the culprits have fled to India, connecting it with points that Sheikh Hasina is still in India and a lot of things. So again the domestic protest has this angle where anti-India slogans, anti-India approach is being brought to the foray. Now let us understand why in this particular context India has been brought into the picture. Now when we are talking about these very protests, as I said, initially it was about justice for the youth leader who died a recent tragic death. Now in this scenario, the protest leaders who were looking for justice, they have alleged that the attackers, the culprits of the death of Osman Hadi, they have fled to India, and India is the one shielding perpetrators. In this scenario, they are demanding that these culprits, these attackers should be extradited, and this is being framed as a sovereignty issue by these protest leaders. Now, this is the immediate trigger that we get to see as of now, and as usual, as I've been talking about a repetitive pattern, that how India comes to the focal point, and in that repetitive pattern as well is another dimension, that how political unity is seen as soon as Bangladesh starts voicing against India. So in this scenario, this anti-India rhetoric which is being set up, this again has unified the fragmented protest groups which were in different regions for different reasons as well. They are together because of this broad theme that has been put up in Bangladesh. This gives an international presence to the domestic grievances of Bangladesh, and this also pressurizes the interim government because of the unification and how it goes to the international level. So yes, India has been brought into the picture, but there are certain advantages, certain patterns of advantages that have been seen of bringing India into rhetoric or the domestic protests of Bangladesh that has been associated. Now in this very context, we get to see a symbolism that is emerging and that has been tried to be established over the years. that India is the external force or the external focal point which is working towards internal repression that has been seen in Bangladesh, and the attack that you see on the Indian diplomatic houses, it is not a military attack. You have to understand that it is a political attack, and it is an attempt to throttle the geopolitical and attempt to use the geopolitical impacts that come with it to bring more attention to what is going on in Bangladesh. Now that we have discussed that how India has been brought into the center stage of the internal repression and internal protests that are going into Bangladesh, now let us also talk about who exactly is Osman Hadi and how come for him that such a level of protests are piling up again. So if we talk about Osman Hadi, he was an important person, significant contributor to the 2024 pro-democracy uprising that we saw in Bangladesh. Now he was the key face of the post-Hasina, that means when Sheikh Hasina was ousted and the youth politics took the central stage, he was the key face there. He was a staunch advocate of anti-authoritarianism. He was a reformist, and he was absolute critical of elite political monopolies that have existed in Bangladesh. And that is why the moment he passed away, his death resonated with youth frustration, democratic aspirants, break from dynastic politics, and his killing converted this political anger of whatever he represented into moral outrage. And that is why Bangladesh, our neighborhood, is boiling again, and unfortunately it is against us. Even though it was a tragic killing of an important youth leader, the concentration towards his justice has faded away and it has become about India again. But this comes in a scenario where in recent times Bangladesh and India have not seen straight eye to eye in the clear direction. There have been issues, and these issues are the reason where India finds itself back again in the internal politics in terms of the rhetoric that is being set now and again. When we are talking about the drifting situation between India and Bangladesh, it also becomes important for us to look into that what are the exact reasons that we see again and again an anti-India movement emerging in Bangladesh, an anti-India sentiment emerging in Bangladesh. So the first and most important reason that we get to understand is the fact that the political partisanship that has existed for India and how it is perceived. So India has always been seen consistently backing Awami League, which cannot be denied as an elite political monopoly that existed, and it also seemed that India was backing stability in Bangladesh rather than democratic pluralism. So the issues that were the core points of pro-democratic youth uprising that we saw in 2024, these issues not only resonated with Bangladesh, but what India was backing in Bangladesh. And that is why the sentiment, anti-India sentiment, has become stronger since 2024. Even when you look at the interim leader, that is Muhammad Yunus, he also speaks in a different direction from India. The map about Greater Bangladesh, talking about how 7 sisters would be taken away. All these remarks come in the idea to keep the anti-India rhetoric strong and keep the unification of fragmented political leaders, fragmented protest leaders, fragmented youth sections together on one side. The second thing that we understand is when we are talking about youth politics taking the center stage, this is where youth is disconnected with what India has been for Bangladesh. In this context, younger Bangladeshis do not have any understanding of the 97 legacy, how liberation of Bangladesh was facilitated by India, what role India played in it, and had it not been for India, this would be a difficult situation for East Pakistan back then. And that is why we find that youth as of now is disconnected from India's and Bangladesh original narrative, original partnership that existed, and they are more susceptible to the social media narratives that are set in by other external players, be it Pakistan, be it China. And in this scenario, youth also has this view of India as a dominant force, that India wants to stand bigger in the regional power, and they do not want to see Bangladesh to be a little inferior or placed sub-primarily to anybody. So all of this is fueling this anti-India sentiment. Adding to this is another layer of democratic backsliding. So when we are talking about the recent years, we have seen the democratic pluralism dialing down in Bangladesh because the monopoly was held by the elite political parties, elite political unions, and this narrative was becoming stronger. That is why we saw that these political parties at the center, there was no understanding or clarification that was given on media suppressions, the disappearings that took place, and electoral credibility as well. All in all, youth lost the trust with not only the political order that existed in Bangladesh, but that political order was backed by India. So youth also lost that trust with India. And now because youth is at the primary main stage, prima facie for Bangladesh, this is where we see Bangladesh and India on different pages. And that is why Bangladesh is seeing constant anti-India sentiments emerging every now and then. Now the reason to this problem is much more than what youth feels about India. It also has to do a lot with structural and long-term drivers that have existed and that have fueled this anti-India sentiment. And this is where we find that there are certain flaws in the relationship that has been maintained from India's end as well. For example, if we talk about the bilateral issues, for the longest time, the main bilateral issues between India and Bangladesh, they have remained unsolved. Be it the Teesta River Agreement, the delay in that, be it the trade imbalance perceptions that have left Bangladesh baffling for the longest time, and the border management frictions. There have been small steps taken in this direction, but something major that could actually give a feeling to Bangladesh that this is being addressed, and this is not being addressed by a dominant player in the region, but this is being addressed by neighbourhood, a partner where bilateral trust exists. Another thing that has fueled this is the economic asymmetry. As I have mentioned that there have been trade imbalance perceptions, you have to focus on the word perceptions, not just the trade imbalance. And this is where Bangladesh also felt that India is not just a dominant regional player. The trade imbalance is being created intentionally and it is insufficiently responsive to Bangladesh's concerns. That means India is not concerned enough. India does not take Bangladesh seriously. And this is where we should have kept our neighbors very close, because as we see neighbors drifting off, we see many external forces, be it Turkey signing up agreement with Bangladesh, be it China trying to bring in Bangladesh into their circle, and Pakistan conducting diplomatic exercises again with Bangladesh. We see such things unfolding, and probably this could have been controlled in the earlier stages if this would have been rightly addressed with dialogue as well as trade. Other than that, as I mentioned, that external powers will use the vacuum that has been created, and China has been upping its game where it has been seen. They have been expanding their role and the offer that they can give, be it for infrastructure, be it for political non-interference, and all of this will do nothing but reduce the trust between Bangladesh and India, reduce the dependence that exists between both the countries, and drift them further away. And because of all this, there have been consequences that India has already seen, and there is more that can come if this is not addressed immediately. For example, if you talk diplomatically, Indian missions are already under threat. There is temporary closure of these visa centers and certain diplomatic missions. Heightened security deployment has been asked for the diplomatic missions. Other security concerns are heightened, especially for Indian diplomats, Indian businesses, and there is extremely strained intelligence cooperation environment that has come in. So we have security concerns not of the Indian people in Bangladesh, but also how the intelligence network, the intelligence environment that has also been compromised. These are the things that we are already having as consequences, and we are eroding the image that we hold in the region. India's very own image of a democratic partner, a trustable partner, a reliable partner, a trusted neighbor has already diminished, especially among the youth and civil society of Bangladesh. And this is what has happened up and until now. In coming times, we can expect more consequences where India will have reduced influence over Bangladesh and the political transitions that take place. There will be extremely cautious cooperation from Bangladesh's end, be it on security matters or others, and this is where China will have a leeway, because Bangladesh would want to balance India with China more aggressively, and this is where in order to address that, we have sovereignty over our foreign policy and internal politics. Bangladesh will facilitate Chinese presence in their country. And this is not it. It's not about just geopolitical and strategic impacts. It is going to cost us economically as well, because this political instability, this lack of trust from Bangladesh is going to have an effect on the trade growth that was expected with Bangladesh. It is going to have a huge impact on the connectivity projects, be it Akhora Agartala link, be it the BBIN project, be it Khulna Mongla Port Rail link or the Maitri Setu. All of this will remain under uncertainty till the things are sorted between India and Bangladesh, and all of this is going to impact energy and also the transit cooperation that exists. So now the question is that yes, we understand the pattern that has been seen in Bangladesh with regards to anti-India sentiment, but what should be done about it? And how urgently India should take it up so as to ensure that we do not lose one another neighbor to China. In this context, India would need to start with a multi-front work where India would need to work on diplomatic recalibration. They would have to shift from any sort of party-centric policy to institution-centric engagement, not just engage the main party in power, but also engage opposition, civil society, youth, and gain democratic credibility. Support the rule of law. Do not go for stability. Work for democratic pluralism. Facilitate it and avoid any perception that we are shielding political actors. India would also need to work on the deliverables, because if we talk about the connectivity and energy cooperation, India has delayed in multiple projects and multiple commitments. So the resolution of the problems needs to be immediate, be it Teesta agreement, be it trade facilitation bottlenecks, and tangible outcomes will help us with Bangladesh more than just rhetoric, than just diplomacy. And if we want Bangladesh to be in our corner for the longest time, then we do not need to focus on just this crisis. We need to focus on what has gone wrong and rebuild the trust for this. You can add in your suggestions in the comment section. Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.